I want to hear from Steve a little bit more about the Senate race. We started down the path of what makes your candidacy distinctive from Al Franken's and Mike McFadden's, and I want to be sure I heard you out on that point.
Oh, when did we do that? In my writing, or what?
No, as we started this conversation today, we talked about what made your candidacy distinctive, and you started down that path. I cut you off so we could hear from Paul.
Oh, okay.
Now, I'd like you to finish that thought, if you
Well,
will.
I didn't see that as part of the campaign discussion at all.
Okay, well,
I was
give us
talking
a few
about
sentences on that.
free and fair elections.
Okay.
And so, okay, let's start with free and fair elections, because as a matter of fact, if you look at Al Franken, what has he been doing? He's been trying to throw cold water all over free and fair elections, okay? He wants to repeal the First Amendment. Now, I know Ted Cruz used that, and it did catch my attention, but as I looked at it and I read over the language, they want to put the control over all finances and even in-kind support for any campaign right in the hands of the members of Congress for federal and of the state legislature for the state. He has contacted the IRS. The IRS has damaged me ever since I ran in 2010. I've made this very clear in the courts. They reduced me to living on $35 a week for about 5 months between me and my wife by playing with, and that's after the state had gone after my emergency unemployment compensation. And that happened like September 12th, you know, right in the middle of the race, and nobody's done anything about it. But I don't want to make those my issues. But I do want to point out that Al is not in favor of that. He said nothing about the gender quotas or the race quotas that the DFL uses, which would prevent somebody like me from even visiting them. I mean, I probably would have. I'm a person of the people, and I believe in a lot of the things that Democrats do. But what I differ is how to get there. I know the market system needs to work. I know we need real education. We need real families, and the like. I think speaking of real families, I'm going to have to just forget that. Wonderful timing. Okay, so, but some of the other issues, and you're saying what makes me a better candidate.
Well, what makes you different and distinctive?
Different, so I can talk about our issue differences. Let's talk about Obamacare. And there's another example of being against free and fair elections. There's no way, and it should be mentioned, that the Independence Party is a major party. We're all legally qualified candidates. There's violation of the Equal Time Act and also the First Amendment to play games with broadcast debates, because basically you're giving a lot of exposure to the voters, and they're going to vote for the people that they know. Unless they're dissatisfied, they're not even going to look at my issues or Hannah Nicholas' issues. I guess who knows if she's in the next 40 debates, but she should, because she's a legally qualified candidate. Al is against those things. Now, let's go back to Obamacare. However, he made the statement in Duluth that his job as a senator is to make sure that Obamacare works as well as it can for all Minnesotans.
Look, there have been obviously problems with the rollout in ACA, and my job is to make the Affordable Care Act work as well as it can for every Minnesotan.
I mean, really, this is the 60th vote that got that across. He still wants to continue to sit there, and all he wants to do is make it work as well as possible. What about fixing it? I'm not going to veer into the train wreck analogy. It obviously is, but I think we have to go further than that. It stops real progress in attacking killer diseases. Now, I worked at the American Cancer Society for 14 months, and I was working there when this campaign started up back in 2007, 2008. And I, for one, was very excited about really making progress in private-public partnerships against cancer, against heart disease, lung disease, diabetes. All of these things we can attack with private and public partnerships. And it's ridiculous to politicize it and to turn it into a bureaucracy. Yesterday, I noticed I was down in Rochester talking to their people, and I noticed this article about Medica, and there was this big controversy about it's a $500 cost for colonoscopies around the state, but what is this? Rochester has $1,300 for a colonoscopy. And you see the leveling argument that's coming out of this. It's an attack on higher quality health care. And I would like to ask Al, Does he believe that all colonoscopies are, that the opinions are like colonoscopies? You know, I don't think so. I think that if you're down at Rochester Mayo, that you're part of a treatment program. And when those people are checking you out, they know how to check you out. This is cancer. It's a serious business. And so this leveling that's coming out of Obamacare is another big problem. I think that is the biggest lie in Obamacare. Not that you won't save money, because we all knew that, but that the Republicans and the rest of the American people, including independents and all of us, don't want to save lives, that we don't care. What they don't want to do is come up with ineffective ways of addressing just the coverage issue, as you were saying, and not actually expanding care. If you look at it, Ebola, the man, Thomas Dunn, who died this morning, he's a victim of what's called a health disparity. And that's the thing we should be targeting. It's killer diseases and health disparities. Most people don't know what that is, but what it means, so when you come into Dallas and you came in from Liberia, you have a very different profile. And that's a health disparity profile. That's kind of what to call it, a profile. They don't recognize your need because it's different than everybody else. If you're a low economic class person who comes in and is at risk for breast cancer, or you're African American, you have a different kind of profile and you're at greater risk, and we have higher deaths and higher mortalities. So that's what we can replace Obamacare with. And I want to move right to it. Sure, I would have repealed it right away. I told Teresa Collette, yeah, repeal it. But she didn't want to do it. They wanted to use it as a political issue, to try to elect a real conservative. Well, it didn't work. And it was unethical even to use that issue to try to just get your candidate elected. In fact, all of that is unethical. Let me give you another example of where we differ. Why I'm better. I can create millions of jobs, and the Congress can create millions of jobs. I don't know if you've heard about this yet, but we're unable to enforce our usury laws here in the state of Minnesota. Does anybody know that? I haven't found anybody yet who knows that. You're a lawyer? Okay, well, there's a case called Minneapolis Marquette Bank versus Omaha Servicing Corporation. It's from 1978, and it went to the U.S. Supreme Court. And we have the National Bank Act passed in 1864, that's not 1964, during the Civil War, so that states could make loans across the nation to other states, and they wouldn't be bound by the usury laws that they had in those states. And one can see a very strong, compelling reason for that during the Civil War, especially with that destruction and devastation. However, it has remained the same ever since. And the condition in 1978 was that Bank of America had started these credit cards. And so they were allowed to come in and sell their credit cards to the borrowers in Minnesota at 18%. Well, that went 6% over the usury rate here in Minnesota. So you can see the picture. How would that create jobs? Well, how many people right now are sinking in debt? 35% of Americans in July, according to the Urban Institute, I believe, they were found that they were in collections. And there's different ways of describing that, and there are different ways of describing that and measuring it, but it doesn't even measure the poor people, because it was measured on credit scores and credit bureaus, and they're not even in the credit bureaus. So what that means is that they are paying usurious interest to out-of-state banks. These are called foreign lenders because they're not Minnesota banks, and they're allowed to charge usurious interest, and they are. Now, if you could reorder your budget so you didn't have to have this big chunk just paying off credit card interest to out-of-state banks, that a lot of these people didn't even know what it would do to them. They had no idea that they would be paying most of their money the rest of their lives for debt. They would be able to spend that money on other things, and Minnesotans could produce goods and services that they could sell to them. That'd be jobs. Furthermore, they wouldn't have to take 2 or 3 part-time jobs just to try to survive and stay in a house, okay? And you wouldn't have to haggle over the minimum wage. Okay, so now Al, he wants to look at student loans, and I've heard that mentioned around the table today. That's nothing compared to this, okay? And as a matter of fact, if you look at the impact of this I would say it's the strongest cause. It isn't what Al talks about. It isn't that credit rating agencies gave obviously safe securities because the taxpayers were going to pay for them AAA ratings. They should have had AAA ratings. That's not the cause. The cause is that because you couldn't enforce your interest rates, usury standards against an out-of-state bank, people could come in and they could just play funny money games. I have one commercial video in which they call Al Mr. Funny Money, but that was just the fact that he used to be a comedian. But the fact is that there's a lot of funny money out there, and it was allowed by this same case. And if you had the state, these people here able to protect Minnesotans against the devastation of bad loans, okay, then I think we'd have a totally different picture. So that's one way we can clearly create jobs. I would say I'm a radical centrist. I was going to say I'm the only radical centrist in this room. What is a radical centrist? It is somebody who will not accept narrowly circumscribed policy definitions worked out by a compromise between the Democrats and the Republicans. Like, here's an example. Al's going to say, well, look at the $486 billion projected deficit for next year. Isn't that great? Aren't we on the road back to recovery? But where did that come from? They say, the parties would say, well, 3% of the GDP is pretty good. I mean, it seems onerous, but it's in line. But why is the GDP going up? Well, because of all the foreign investment. And you're creating things for export, you're investing directly in those companies. I believe all or most of that is counted as GDP. And as that doubles by next year, are we going to just have 1.5% of GDP, so we'll have a sustainable deficit? I would say no. So the way that we do, a radical centrist would measure the sustainability of the deficit would be, well, how does it impact the taxpayers? And how does the tax burden, how does that affect job creation? How does that affect consumption? And that's another point I'll make. The credit card thing, 70% of the spending of GDP is consumption. So when you're increasing that, you're having a radical impact on the economy. I just can't believe that no one has taken this up. I mean, it's so obvious to me once I read the case and once I looked at it. I'd heard about the case, and just this year I looked it up. And as I read through it, I said, yeah, this is definitely going to affect the economy. But so a radical centrist would say we have to have a real, looking not for Band-Aid solutions, but the real definition of what is the impact of our deficit, how can we get it done. Now, I came up in 2010 with the obvious observation.
We have about 3 or 4 minutes.
Okay, very good, thank you. Hard cut. So I came up in 2010 with the obvious observation that we cannot sustain this level of debt. We're talking about $17 trillion. I don't care what the CB says. It definitely is not sustainable. And they're starting, by the way, to blame Social Security recipients and Medicare recipients, which are basically insurance programs, okay, with, that they're going to make it unsustainable. Well, that's not what's making it unsustainable. And we can talk about that, but well, okay, I probably lost my point, but I'll probably remember it just at the hard cut.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
You did not fill out a questionnaire for us with some biographical information. Could you?
I did.
Well, we didn't receive it. So
Well, I'm sorry I sent it.
Send it again, please.
Oh, I sent it to the editorial board.
It should go to Denise Brownfield, the person who contacted you.
It was to Scott.
No.
It had Scott's signature, and it went back. Okay, I'll send it.
Yeah, send it to Denise. And,
All right.
And do you have a website, sir?
Yes, I do. Steve
Okay.
Carlson for Congress 2010.
But you're running not for Congress.
.com. Well, I would consider a senator a member of Congress. I definitely
Your
would.
website is Steve Carlson for Congress
2010.
2010.
Yeah, and the reason is
.com.
because you don't want to drop all of those important issue debates and events off. And from what I understand, talking to iPage, I would have to do that if I took on a new, I don't know what exactly you call that thing. So I have a lot of different policy issues than Al. I would actually go in and caucus with both parties and other independent voters. I do not respect gridlock. I do not respect parties. And let me just make clear. I didn't say I wouldn't vote for any member of the Independence Party. I hope you didn't understand that. But I would not vote for the party per se, because parties are the problem. What the Independence Party does is give people a third major party choice, and that should be what it is and should be all it is. It grew out of a real third party movement with Perot, and I was out in Washington at that time because I was out there for a journalism convention. I'm a managing editor of the Asian American Press, and Perot was out there, and they were pulling the support back from Bush, and it was a major shift. And we have a major statement by people all over this country that we want a third party. It's ridiculous to be here trying to bury a third party. However, the third party has to include federal. And I've been told, these things I told about litmus tests, I was told directly, you cannot come in this tent. Do you agree on marijuana? Do you agree on homosexuality? This is Mark Jenkins who said this to me.
And you don't?
I think I set out my positions at the very beginning, that I'm against sending anybody to jail for marijuana. However, I don't believe we should raise taxes on it. I don't believe we should regulate it, because what we're doing is encouraging a vice. This is a health problem. All these other drugs that Brandon didn't want to address, they have to be addressed, and they're a health problem. And when people are trapped in that, they shouldn't be criminalized, okay? And they should be treated like they have, maybe they're not aware of what they're doing to their mind or their body, and their families should be involved, if they can be. Sometimes that, is a problem. And as far as marriage, as I said, I was asked in 2010, when I was debating Teresa Collette, I said, well, people can enter into any contracts they want to in this country. I don't see any legal reason to restrict that. However, that is not marriage. And I think all Americans basically know that that's not marriage. And if you call it marriage, what you're saying is that marriage has become a new government program. You're going to get new government benefits for being married. And we don't have to do that. We could vest these contracts with exactly the same kind of rights, including visiting privileges in hospitals. It's not necessary to go on the attack against the churches. I see the Catholic Church, they're trying to destroy the Catholic Church. It's a hateful thing. And that's because it involves this issue of homosexuality, of molestation of boys as part of the same kind of what many would call perversions. And so I would say that we must allow parents to train their kids what they think is right or wrong. We must allow churches, we must allow school teachers not to be there to give a new kind of indoctrination for homosexuality. So that, just to compare, as you asked.
Another candidate is coming in. You have our cards. If you have any additional thoughts you'd like